The following content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not constitute means for diagnosis, healthcare advice, nor treatment. Make use of a qualified healthcare professional for such purposes.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Dr. Charlene Ortiz, and today we are going to talk about the introduction of a research article. What would it entail to write an adequate introduction section for a summary of your paper? Notice that in this specific case, we are going to go through the process of what would it look like to write that introduction section based on a previous article that you guys have selected for this semester, and also with the information that is presented on an article. So we're going to have a real article that we're going to be working on. So first of all, let's review the instructions of that assignment. So for those of you who are in class, this is what your class will look like once you open it up. So if you want to follow along with me, please feel free to do so. So what you're going to do, you're going to go to your top left and you're going to select the section of modules. That's one way of many to get to our assignment. Now, what I would like you to do is to scroll down and you're going to see that this assignment has been broken into multiple sections. Of course, today we're going to be talking about the introduction section. So if we keep scrolling down, you'll see a section titled Homework in all caps, Research Report, and you're going to have a study overview of said assignment. So let's go ahead and click on that. Once you click on that, there is an overview, I should say, of all of the sections that are included and that are expected of you regarding the overview of the entirety of the homework assignment. So notice that this is simply the overview. If you want a very, very detailed description of each set of instructions, you can download this document here. And if you notice, job applicant research study, and it's going to have both slides and also it's going to have the detailed instructions here. Okay, so detailed instructions are under job applicant study, research report instructions. And if you want a little bit more detail with the slides, I'm also going to present that to you guys today. So let's click on the overview. Notice that for this homework assignment, from this point forward for all of your sections, you're going to be utilizing the APA template that you have created for this course, okay? So you will be using that template. And for those of you who are in psychology, you might as well keep this template because this will be the template that you will use the rest of your career here with the institution. Now, remember that you had already conducted a PsycInfo search and you're going to utilize that article as well. And remember that for this assignment, you have to use the article of Huffcutt and Associates. And as you can see, bless you. As you can see, that's this article here, okay? So you're going to use the article that you selected, plus the Huffcutt job application study. And to give you an overview, that's what this article looks like, okay? So this is the entirety of said article. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more for you guys. So this is the article that you're going to be working with, and also the article that you had selected. So any questions so far? Good deal. All right, so let's go back to the overview. Now, I also want you to download the document that I was noting that has the detailed instructions, okay? So please make sure to download this document that has the very detailed set of instructions. So if you haven't done so, please go ahead and download. And also, something that I want to remind you is that this assignment has a statistical component to it, right? And you're going to use this following document, right? So the research project synopsis with data output. So that would be this document here. However, I recommend that you start working with the statistical part of this paper after we had started talking about the statistics lecture that I'm going to be presenting. Okay, I'm just showing you where that document is, but I recommend that you start looking into the statistical data once we have covered statistical procedures here in class. So if we continue with our summary for this research assignment, notice that previously you have conducted a PsycInfo search for your article. Notice that most of you have already submitted successfully the job interview and personality keyword search, and you have already selected your article. Some of you needed a couple of revisions, but don't worry. Once you get your article approved, that will be the article that you will use and you will receive full credit. So no worries there. Notice that once that submission was posted, I will give you the go or no go to select that article. Now, this is where we are today. The first thing that you're going to write is the introduction section. And we're going to cover very extensively what that introduction section could look like. Also, I already completed a lecture concerning one of the paragraphs of the introduction. One of the paragraphs of said introduction is the hypotheses paragraph, right? So I already have that lecture posted it's a workshop that I had presented, I should say, a little bit ago. So that workshop is what you're going to utilize in order to write your hypotheses paragraph. Remember that your hypotheses paragraph is paragraph number 3 of your introduction section that is upcoming, that is due soon. Now, if we revert back to your slides and your presentation, I should say, remember that we're going to be working throughout the semester. So the first thing would be the introduction section, followed by the method, a little bit further along the semester, your results, and then your discussion. Notice that they are presented throughout the semester. So please make sure, and I'm also going to mention it in class, and all of these due dates are posted in your syllabus. Like I mentioned today, your introduction section will be due in approximately 2 weeks. Remember that when you submit each section, I want you to label it as such. So for example, your first section that's due is your introduction. So it will be last name and intro. And then when you submit your methods, it's going to be last name, method, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I want you to save each document as such. What is going to happen afterwards, after you submit each section, so for example, your introduction and your methods, results, and discussion, you're going to receive each section and it's going to be graded. Each section is going to be graded. If there is something you need to change, I will post it on your comments whenever I grade your paper. If the document seems okay, you wouldn't receive any specific feedback as to what to change. However, if I do give you feedback, what you need to do is incorporate that feedback because your final paper is the combination of all of these sections, right? So if you didn't improve and you didn't rewrite the sections that I asked you to rewrite, or any feedback that I gave you, then unfortunately, you're going to receive a poor grade. So please make sure to implement the commentary, whether it be by myself or my assistant. And remember that whatever feedback we give you, remember that that is so that you can improve your paper and receive a better grade for your final paper. So notice that based on that compilation of these 4 sections, so introduction, method, result, and discussion, remember that then you're going to save it as your last name report, and that will be due at the end of the semester, okay? Due at the end of the semester. And that will be all of each of these 4 combinations, the combination of these 4 sections together, and hopefully with the feedback that we gave you in order to improve. So that is a summary, a quick overview of what's expected of you regarding the research assignment. Any questions about the overview of the research assignment? Let's look into the specifics of your research assignment. So if you follow along with your slides, it's the PowerPoint titled Job Applicant Project Synopsis, okay? So let's talk a little bit as to what is expected of you for this final paper. Remember that you are going to utilize, and as I just showed, on Canvas is listed as Huffcut Job Applicant Study, okay? So please make sure that that is the article that you're utilizing. Notice that this will be your main source. You're going to utilize this article as your main source concerning your paragraph introduction. Okay, so please make sure that that is your main source for the first section of your research paper, and that is the introduction. It's very important. It is very important that you guys utilize the description that is provided to you in that article concerning their model. In regards to a model is generally presented in any research project and any research assignment. What is a model exactly? A model allows for the interpretation of data. It allows for the interpretation of research. So if you see a model under research, for example, in Huffcut, I want you to utilize that model to explain how exactly that data was interpreted, okay? So please make sure to utilize the model as it was described by Huffcut and the other authors within that research article. Now, we revert back to your presentation. Notice that you guys already conducted a psych info search. That is going to be your additional article related to the topic of personality and job description. So notice that you're going to utilize that specific article as a content for your second paragraph of your introduction. Okay, so the first paragraph is Huffcut, and then the second paragraph is going to be that of the article that you had selected and that I have approved. If I haven't approved your article, don't worry. I will be approving your article because generally maybe another student had selected that previously. So no worries there. You will have an article to cite. Now, this is an immensely short overview of what the study looks like, okay? So notice that this is the example. This is the example of the model as it was presented by Huffcut. Notice that in this model, what he is proposing is that the interviewee performance is going to be a significant factor in regards to the interview ratings. Notice all of the explanations that they are trying to utilize in order to provide an explanation of their data. So if you notice, for example, in regards to interviewee performance, they have the general attributes of that specific candidate. Notice that they also have the core candidate qualifications. So if you notice, this is an explanation as to what are the factors that contribute to the understanding of that dependent variable. So any questions as to how they utilize this model in order to conduct an explanation for their data. Now, let's talk a little bit more in detail as to what is expected of you when it comes to that third paragraph that you're going to be utilizing, that you're going to be writing, okay? So remember, paragraph one is Huffcut, paragraph 2 is the summary of the second article that you presented. Let's talk about the third paragraph. The third paragraph is that of the hypothesis, right? And what exactly is going to be included in that specific paragraph? Remember that what we're going to include is the experimental hypothesis and the descriptive hypothesis. Now, let me show you exactly what workshop can you utilize in order to write that experimental and that descriptive hypothesis. So if we revert back to your Canvas, and also for those of you who are watching online, it's going to be in the description listed down below. That workshop as to how to write a hypothesis paragraph is listed right here, right? So I have the presentation already posted for you guys, and also the workshop as to how to write a hypothesis paragraph. Notice that it is listed already here. Now, what are you going to find in that video? So one of the things that you're going to find in that video, for example, is the description as to where to place that paragraph. You're also going to have an explanation as to exactly what an experimental hypothesis is, and also what is a descriptive hypothesis. So it also provides a more detailed explanation as to how are you going to justify said paragraph or said hypotheses. Remember that you're also going to present the relevance and how important was the model that was presented by Tufcut. So you're also going to have more continuation as to what exactly does it take? How exactly are you going to write down that specific hypothesis? So for example, what should be included? For example, the independent and dependent variable. Notice that you're going to have the dependent variables of, say, attractiveness. So this video goes very in detail as to how to write a description or an experimental hypothesis. One of the last things that you're going to have is, first of all, we're going to have a description of an experimental hypothesis and also a description of the descriptive hypothesis so that you are able to illustrate said paragraph. And that will be your paragraph number 3. Any questions so far about paragraph number 1, paragraph number 2, and paragraph number 3? And again, if you want a detailed descriptions as to how exactly you're going to write that 3rd paragraph, please make sure to check out the workshop that I had already recorded for your benefit. And also the slides are posted on Canvas if you're interested in knowing, okay, this is exactly where I'm going to find information for my hypothesis paragraph.
Article that you gave us to like kind of go through all this stuff, or are we using both of them?
For your hypothesis paragraph, you're only going to utilize Huffcut, okay? You're only going to utilize Huffcut for your hypothesis paragraph, okay? So I would utilize your 2nd article as basically a foundation to understand better how you're going to write that hypothesis, both descriptive and experimental. So I do want you to utilize it as a sort of background, if you will, but I want you to utilize Huffcut for that specific paragraph. So that is a really good question. Any other question? Let's talk a little bit more in detail as to what an experimental hypothesis is. What is a descriptive hypothesis? And again, you want a very detailed description, please make sure to refer to the video regarding how to write an hypothesis paragraph. What exactly is an experimental hypothesis? When we are talking about an experimental hypothesis, what we're going to look into is the main effect, right? So whenever we are referring to the main effect, I want you to think about the term independent variable. Independent variable. Remember that whenever we are reviewing aspects of effects, what we're trying to look into is the impact that that independent variable might have had towards the dependent variable, right? So in this case, we have the face attractiveness of the interviewee and its impact, for example, on the interview notes. So here, as an independent variable, we have the attractiveness of that individual, the face that was presented, and its impacts, for example, of the interview notes. And as you remember, in regards to your review, those interview notes, what they had included in their data was their personality, right? The personality that was gathered. So notice that the intent is to determine whether or not the attractiveness of said interviewee did in fact had an impact in regards to the depiction of the personality of said interviewee. Something really interesting about it is that we know that there is an impact between attractiveness and in regards to how we rate people. And as a little fun note, also your name also has an impact as to how you're going to be evaluated. Now, we also have another important aspect when it comes to an experimental hypothesis, and that is an interaction, right? That is the interaction. Whenever we are talking about an interaction, statistically speaking, what we are referring to is that it's not solely the impact of the one variable towards the effect of the dependent variable, but that sometimes we have the interaction of two variables, and the conjunction of those two variables can have an impact upon the dependent variable. So that is another aspect that you should consider whenever writing your hypothesis paragraph, particularly when you are geared towards the experimental hypothesis. Any questions about that? Yes, ma'am.
Those two variables are independent? Two
So-
independent variables?
So, yes, sometimes you can have the interaction of two independent variables. So for example, think about therapy, right? And an example that I like giving in class. So for example, think about therapy. And I'm trying to study, say, the impacts of therapy and reduction of depression, for example, right? But then think about if religious services also help with the reduction of depressive symptoms. So notice that now we have two variables, right, that interacted together in order to reduce the symptoms of depression. So yes, that can occur. That is an example of how an interaction can occur. So does that answer your question, ma'am? Good deal. So let's look into other aspects. Think about if there is an interaction, if there is a change in the dependent variables based on both factors. So for example, the face and the notes. Notice that in this specific case, think about the ratings or the dependent variables of a coworker and the attractive rating. So for example, if we were to combine the personality notes with the face, would they have an impact, right? Their interaction, would it have an impact on the coworker rating and the attractive rating? Let's look into another type of hypothesis, and that is a descriptive hypothesis. Whenever we are thinking about a descriptive hypothesis, generally a descriptive hypothesis, what it is trying to do is simply, as the term suggests, provide information about descriptive data. And descriptive data can be, for example, frequency data. Whenever we are referring to frequency data, think about aspects of, for example, gender. Think, for example, how many people were male, female, or non-binary. Think about how many participants or how many ratings that they provide. For example, this person was attractive, this person wasn't attractive. So those are a few examples as to what to look at for whenever you're thinking about frequency data. So in regards to our study, let's look a little bit more in detail. So let's look into frequency data as it relates to the Huffcut article. Notice that whenever we're talking about frequency, we're referring literally as to a count, right? How many of these or how many less of these can we find in our article? Let's look into frequency data when it comes to Huffcut. Notice that in this specific case, we can count, for example, whenever we have negative interview notes, we can literally have a frequency. We can have a count of the more the negative review, the more the negative interview notes, the higher that response of not hiring that person, right? So again, this is an example of a hypothesis, of a descriptive hypothesis, right? We have the greater, the negative, interview note, greater, the frequency, how many people would say, I would not hire this person. Let's look at another example of a descriptive hypothesis. If you recall, we have talked previously about aspects of correlations in class. And whenever we are thinking about correlations, remember that we are looking into a relationship of variables. Notice that in this specific case, we are referring to a relationship between, for example, the coworker rating of a positive note. So for example, how that coworker rated that note as positive is going to have a relationship in regards to the salary for all notes. So notice that what we are describing here is a correlation, meaning that we're trying to describe a relationship between the coworker rating of that positive note and the later salary of that individual. So that will be considered a descriptive hypothesis. Any questions about that? Fantastic, good deal.